Hello there! In this video I show you my film documentary essay for drama in the curriculum. First I'd like to share some information with you about the chosen playwright and then my personal interest in the chosen plays. I have chosen to focus on three plays by the same American playwright, Tennessee Williams. He was considered one of the foremost playwrights and dramatists of the 20th century of American drama. He first became famous with the success of the Glass Menagerie in 1944, which was followed by A Streetcar Named Desire in 1947, and then Cat on a Hot Tin Roof in 1955. A Streetcar Named Desire even won a Pulitzer Prize, which is one of the highest honors. And therefore, in this film documentary, I have chosen to compare and contrast The Glass Menagerie, A Streetcar Named Desire, and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. What personally interests me in these three plays are Williams's autobiographical elements. Because before I became a teacher, I was a child and family psychologist. So human behavior always stays something that has kept my interest. For instance, Tennessee Williams himself, he grew up in a dysfunctional family. His father was a hard-drinking salesman and he was also often absent. His father was also violently abusive to his mother when he was finally home. The family life was full of tension and despair. His sister even ran away from home one day, and she got a frontal lobotomy for her mental illnesses. While growing up, Tennessee Williams got a typewriter and he was admitted to the University of Missouri to become a playwright. However, under his family conditions, his father forced him to drop out and work in an international shoe factory with a friend named Stanley Kowalski, which is an interesting name if you recognize or if you have read A Streetcar Named Desire already. Luckily, in the end of his academic education, he still managed to graduate, and then he finally launched his career, not knowing at the time that his personal life would influence his plays that much. Therefore, in my film documentary, I focus on a recurring theme in all of the three plays, which is the vulnerable state of women in the Southern society. In all plays, women are portrayed vulnerable and fragile, and this is influenced by three things. The first one is the power of the patriarchal society. The second one is the characters diverting from society's norms. And the third one is the desire of the characters. In the first argument, let's take a look at the power of the patriarchal society. Because in the plays, patriarchy is shown in the discourse among characters, the dramatic conflicts, and the emotion shown by the characters. Firstly, in Glass of a Hot Tin Roof, or the Glass Menagerie, the patriarchal dominance is clearly shown. In this story, we focus on Tom Wingfield's past memories and the incidents during the play. The dominance of the man in this play is evident. For instance, Tom's dominance is noticeable at the beginning of the play when Amanda and family members cannot say grace before a meal, before Tom comes to the table. Literally on page 6 already is said, we can't say grace until you come to the table. And that is about Tom. Another example is when Jim asks Tom where he will go if he leaves the house. And Tom replies arrogantly by saying that he is male and he can make decisions, or he can take decisions like his father. This is in the middle of the book. And Tom even shows that he does not care about what his mother will feel if he leaves the house. The other way around, some of the women seem to accept this patriarchal dominance. For instance, when we take a look at Laura in the Glass Menagerie, we'll see that she shows her inner fear for the male dominance. This becomes visible when Jim enters the room and Laura acts nervously and she is breathless. There's even said that the male presence becomes intolerable of being in the same room, on page 64. The male's power and decision making becomes clear in this play. Secondly, in A Streetcar Named Desire, the patriarchy of the 1950s in America is full on display. This play is focused on the psychological effects of the male dominance on each of the characters. Stanley Kowalski is the main man in this play, and the patriarchy is described by all his movements and his attitude. For example, he sizes up women, he uses sexical classifications. And Blanche, one of the main characters, is evidently uncomfortable around him, as she is definitely aware of his dominant position in the household of Stanley and her sister Stella. Stanley is in full control, and throughout the play he beats his wife, he fights with his friends, and eventually he even rapes Blanche, which makes her insane and sent to an institute. Lastly, about patriarchal society, in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, masculinity appears to be a key theme. Throughout the play, one could even wonder, what does a good man look like? What does a family man look like? What does a husband look like? Because on one hand, we see Big Papa as the head of the family, he owns the estate, and he has two sons, Cooper, who is the oldest, and Brick, who is the youngest, and both sons are married. Cooper and his wife May have 5 children, and the 6th child is on its way. But on the other hand, Brick and his wife Maggie, they are childless, and which causes a lot of speculations about their marriage. Even Brick's possible homosexuality is discussed. Brick is exactly the opposite of his father, Big Daddy. The father is portrayed as the patriarch of the family. He has an almighty power over everyone's lives, while Brick is portrayed as someone vulnerable, drinking, and running away from problems. It even seems like he doesn't care about his wife. Let's move on to the second argument, which is the characters diverting from society's norms. In my opinion, all plays belong to the American realism movement, with its emphasis on emotion, imagination, and the individual. However, according to the New World Encyclopedia, the style in Williams's play was Southern Gothic, which is a genre quite unique to the American literature, which relies on ironic or unusual events to guide the plot. This movement becomes clear when we take a look at the moral blindness of the Southerners and the decay of the society. Tennessee Williams writes his plays as a critique on the society after the Civil War and the slavery period. Because in this period, when a black man whistled to a white woman, he could have been lynched. But when a rich woman had one of her servants killed out of punishment, people would have turned a blind eye. So it's the idea that the moral compass is based on who you are in that particular society. In the Glass Menagerie, this critique is shown by the social norms and the economic conditions of the middle class people in American society or in the Southern society. Traditionally, women are portrayed as fragile and vulnerable, and throughout the play, the attitude of males and females towards stress and confrontation is starkly different. For example, Amanda and Laura begin to cry and they are sunk down. They show women to be completely irrational and rather emotional. It shows that, or it seems that females are completely dependent on males, and when the males abandon them, they are deserted and destroyed. But on the other way around, in the Glass Menagerie, the role of girls and women is just to deceive, to catch, or to attract males. And this becomes clear when Amanda puts powder on Laura's bosom and while they are getting ready. Amanda even uses the word trap for girls. She quotes, or the book quotes, all girls are a trap, a pretty trap, and men expect them to be, on page 47. Next, when we take a look at A Streetcar Named Desire, we are familiar with the patriarchal atmosphere already. Stanley is the male dominant and the male head of the household. However, it feels like this social norm changes throughout the play, now that Blanche has moved in. This is shown when Blanche's sister Stella, she goes against Stanley's authority more often. Blanche is the main influence of this, since Blanche berates Stanley in front of Stella and his own friends. Because of this, Stanley doesn't trust Blanche and why she even got to their home in the first place. And he tries to get rid of her. He wants to restore the original hierarchy before Blanche was in their house. And lastly, in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Maggie is firstly portrayed as the traditional 1950s lady. She is lively, she's gorgeous, and she has a sexual presence. She spends the majority of the play trying to get Brick to sleep with her, since she wants to have a baby. However, in the plot, Maggie's character is more than meets the eye. She has an intelligent plan for Big Daddy's estate. Brick and Maggie are childless, which means there's no continuing family line. This means that Maggie has no guarantee to get her part of the estate after Big Daddy dies. While most women are only portrayed with emotions, Williams also shows Maggie's intelligent personality. Let's move on to the third and the last argument, which is the desire of the characters. Williams created exceptional female characters, but all ladies are characterized with flaws. They are beautiful, they are lively, imaginative, but simultaneously they are fragile and vulnerable in the environment that they are in. Women rely too much on the comfort of the men around them, and when this fails, they turn to the kindness of others, or even strangers, seeking love, affection, and compassion. In one play in which desire is a real struggle, it is already foreshadowed in the title, in A Streetcar Named Desire. The urge for desire is shown in multiple ways, such as sexual desire, but also desire for power and greed. For instance, Blanche is portrayed as a flirt, and she's portrayed as an object for the male's sexual desire. Even some flirtations are noticeable between Blanche and Stanley, who is her sister's husband. And these two characters had a big dispute in the play. But this was suddenly resolved when Blanche began flirting with him. Also, when we look at her appearance, physical appearance, she dresses provocatively, and as she is characterized in red satin, in silks, and with a lot of jewelry. She also calls a lot of attention to her body with the way she dresses. Eventually, Blanche's pursuit of sexual desire has led to the loss of Belreve, the family house, her expulsion from the school because she worked there and she started sleeping with a student, and eventually it led to her forced removal from Stanley and Stella's house since she was sent to a psychiatric institution. A different kind of desire plays a role in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Yes, of course, this play is also packed with sexual desire among the characters, among Brick and Maggie. For instance, Maggie is personified as the cat on a hot tin roof because she cannot be pleased by Brick, because he turned to booze because of his friend's death. But let's take a look at desire from a different angle, namely greed. In this play, Big Papa and Mama, they own a big wealthy plantation, and Big Papa doesn't have long to live. And when this is brought into light, the family start discussing what should happen to the estate after Big Papa's death. Cooper and his wife May, they get dollar signs in their eyes. And especially May, she is a symbol of greed and sourness. She taunts Maggie for her lack of motherhood. However, Maggie, Rick's wife, she fights back. Because, as mentioned before, Maggie also wants her share of the estate, and there's only one way to be sure of it: to become pregnant. And in the end of the play, Maggie accomplishes both of her desires. She's pregnant, and her greed is also satisfied because Big Daddy immediately arranged the lawyers to change the estate documents after Maggie announced that she had life in her. Let's go to the conclusion because, all in all, a recurring theme in the play, in all of the three plays, was the vulnerable state of women in the Southern society. However, in the way that William depicted it, it became clear that not only women had a fragile position in the society, also men, like Tom, Brick, and Stanley, they had their emotional flaws. On the other hand, women like Blanche and Maggie were also shown as more than just beauty and emotions. With this, we've reached the end of the documentary. Here are the sources used. I've used the three books, or the three plays, and I've been inspired by the four articles mentioned under the books. Lastly, one interesting fact is that Williams died in 1983 when he choked to death on a plastic top of a medication, which he probably mistook for a sleeping pill. And with this, as a dramatic writer, his own life also ended dramatically. This was my presentation.